Well, hello everybody. Welcome to a rather light Kent Digital Meetup Maidstone tonight, hosted by myself. I'm Rich Dean. I'm the founder and creative director here at Supersonic Playgrounds. If you don't know us, we are a WordPress specialist web design and development agency based here in Maidstone. I've also got Chantel, who's our marketing executive. Wave, Chantel, hello. And I've got Lindsay, who is our client success manager. And we've also got Ashley, who is our junior designer. So all the guys here tonight sort of helping me make sure that the event runs smoothly. As you all know now, tonight's topic is artificial intelligence and machine learning. We've got some really good speakers joining us tonight. So firstly, we're going to be hearing from Stuart. Stuart is a director at Amplio Technologies.
Hi guys.
Hi Stuart, nice to see you tonight. And Stuart's going to be talking about robotic process automation. We're then going to have a short break, 10 minutes in between, and then we'll be hearing from Andy, Andy Redman.
Hi guys.
And Andy's a principal cloud solution architect at Wirehive, and he's going to be talking about AI and what's possible. So we'll save any questions that everybody might have until the end of the presentations, just to make sure that we run on time and everything runs smoothly. As always, we'd always like to hear people's feedback. So we've got a very short survey which Chantel is going to be sharing in the chat, so that'll be going out in a minute. So if you could take time to spare 2 minutes just to complete that at some point during the session, that really helps us to make sure the events run really well and are the best they can be in the future. So let's jump into Stuart's presentation, 25 minutes. So yeah, Stuart, over to you. I'll stop sharing. Oh, there you go, perfect. Yeah, over to you.
Hi guys, I assume you can see my screen. I just heard you mention that, Rich. So welcome to sort of my talk on robotic process automation. It's designed to demystify and debunk the perceived complexities around digitalization technology, specifically robotic process automation. Obviously, I've already introduced myself briefly earlier, so I'll just crack on right now. Thank you all for your time and attention today, and I do hope you learn something from this. I've presented this once or twice before. Normally it takes a little bit longer, so I may skip over a couple of things a little bit quickly going through it. So feel free to stop me if there's anything that you want to elaborate on further. Obviously we have the question session at the end, so happy to take questions there, and if anyone wants to have any further discussion, my contact details will be at the end, so we can take this offline. That's not a problem. So firstly, robotic process automation, what is it? So essentially it's new technology. Well, it's not new technology actually. It's effectively it's technology that it mimics the keyboard strokes and mouse clicks of human operators. They're not robots as you see in the screen. They're metaphorical robots. They're just effectively computer software. And what they do, as I said, is they mimic the inputs and outputs from human operators as they manipulate data and follow rules in their particular roles. So anything you can do that defines rules, that is defined by rules on a computer, this can be done. It doesn't simulate the brain. It doesn't think for itself, so to speak. It's not artificial intelligence, which I'm sure you'll hear from Andy shortly. This is pretty simple stuff. It just replicates the hands, and we program the robot to replicate the hands. And what's great about this technology, we can program these robots to process repetitive tasks, work 24/7 in the dark, if you like. They don't make mistakes or lose focus. So really great opportunity for businesses here to increase productivity, and very useful to enable staff to focus on what's more important in their jobs, which is the humanistic element and the more creative aspects of their roles. So just a quick brief on the technology. At this time, RPA can be classified into sort of the two categories you see highlighted there. They're attended and unattended robots. Mainly the difference between a virtual assistant and a virtual workforce. The attended robots, as we call it, attended or assisted robots, they reside on the user's desktop. They can be in your laptop, and they will help you. They're managed by you, controlled, started and stopped by you, and they can help you achieve sort of monotonous tasks and repetitive work that you may need to do. The unattended, the virtual workforce, is sort of where we're getting to now. This is really what unlocks the value in organizations. It resides on a server in the cloud, on a virtual machine, what we call a digital workforce. The autonomous and cognitive, they're sort of in the pipeline. Maybe Andy's got a little bit more insight on that one. Autonomous is where they can manage and control themselves and potentially start to repair themselves. And then cognitive, we're getting into more of the AI space where it starts to get a bit more predictive and understands what's coming and a bit more deeper in sort of trend analysis and machine learning. So at the minute, mostly what we're seeing clients deploying is the unattended virtual workforce. And what that does is takes the monotony away from their staff and allows them to focus on, as I said, the more cognitive parts of their role that require human judgment. And the robots will just there and just churn the engine, as it were, just keep business ticking over. So why RPA? When compared side by side with their human counterparts, the robots are far superior in what it is that their narrow focus that it is that they're programmed to do. The humans simply cannot compete in terms of the cost, the uptime, the speed, the scalability, and the return on investment is a lot easier to manage. But this is to say the robots are only good at what it is that they're programmed to do. They don't deal with ambiguity well. They don't deal with poor data very well. They don't understand when a process is broken, and they can pick up the phone or go and speak to somebody or make a workaround. Obviously, humans are much better at that. But in terms of very transactional, repetitive processes that we can program as a script, the robots are far superior to any human operator. And not to mention, a lot of human operators don't like that sort of work. I know we've all probably done it in the past, copy and pasting, manipulating data. We're very repetitive, and we make mistakes. Our productivity, our performance will dip throughout the day. This chart here shows the green line is as a human operator gets to work, has a coffee, warms up, gets into their flow, stops for lunch, productivity stops. You're going back from lunch, maybe a bit refreshed, or maybe it takes them a little while to get back up to speed, and then a potential dip towards the end of the day when they go off to snooze. The robot, 100%, 24/7, all throughout the night. And as I mentioned on the previous slide, infinitely scalable. As business trends, as the business cycle develops, having robots on our workforce can easily help us to track that business cycle much more tightly. We then don't need to spend time hiring. We can just copy and paste the robots if we need to, scale up infinitely. And then when the coronavirus pandemic shuts business down, we can just pause. We don't then need to hang on to our staff for a period of time until we realize that potentially the market's not coming back as quick as we thought it was going to do. Then you start going through severance, redundancy activities, only then for the uptick to come, and we're scrambling then to hire these people again. That's a very inefficient way and a very costly way to do business. By having the robots programmed to pick up the monotonous, repetitive work, the stuff that keeps the business going, allows, as I said, the humans to focus on the innovative work that they can do and actually bring more value to their clients and more value to the organization as a whole. So just a few examples of the typical processes. If you were to deploy this in your organization, we need to look for certain processes and tasks that exhibit these characteristics. They need to be very manual and rules-based, quite repetitive. That gives us the volume to follow the scripts. Multiple systems interactions does help. Automation generally operates on the user interface. So if you're switching between a number of different screens, the robot can handle this pretty well. Stable systems are required. If the systems are going through lots and lots of changes, the robots can be quite brittle, especially RPA robots. If we're using API programming interfaces, then they're a little bit more resilient to that. But RPA in general, if we're looking for a box on a screen whereby a human would know if the submit button was on the left or the right, if it moves through a different iteration of the software, the robot won't pick that up. There are certain techniques we can use when programming these to make it a little bit more resilient. But if wording changes and position on the screen changes, potentially that could interrupt the flow. So fairly stable systems. If we can keep an eye out on when updates are coming, we can then prepare for them so that the the robot is updated in line with the system update. Labor intensive processes are very good. One client of ours had a team of 25 staff just processing their invoices. So they would get a PDF invoice from a supplier. I think they were doing around about 1,000 of these a day. So they had a team of 25 trying to handle this load. Very repetitive, very rules-based, as you can imagine with a finance process. And we were able to deploy a few robots tactically in there that helped them to actually free up a lot of capacity in their operations. And I know as we at the start of this webinar, there was a few discussions on robots taking jobs and things like that. What we're seeing generally is a robot doesn't generally take a role wholesale. What you'll find is a robot will take a certain percentage of that role, say, and leave the cognitive judgment or the what we call exceptions, whereby the things that the robot can't handle, if there's missing data or information that doesn't add up, or a step that doesn't compute, computer says no, and then it just stops. As I've said, they can be quite brittle. What they will then do is throw the exception to a human who can then look at it and go, right, I see what's the problem here. Humans have that inherent judgment and expertise that we can infer information. The robots will never infer that. If humans are error prone in their process, after we've done 1,000 transactions a day that look very, very repetitive and much the same, potentially a robot can do that much more efficient than a human. They won't make mistakes in that sense. And with high volumes and frequencies, that gives us the scale in order to give a very quick return on investment. The ROI on one of these projects is nearly always less than 12 months, and in some cases around about 3. And when you're looking for the characteristics of the process, anything that you do that involves mouse clicks, keystrokes, structured form fill-ins, copy and paste, logging in and out, screen switching, querying a database, or logging into a website and extract using some web services, all those sorts of activities will lend themselves well to this technology. If you've got a clunky old legacy system, an old mainframe system, or even Oracle and SAP can be a little bit daunting to some people. These are great for just repetitively running through those. So if you're thinking about it in your days, in your processes, in your work, these are the sorts of things that you want to be looking for that will give you the business case to deploy a robot that won't necessarily take your job. What we look for is more of an augmentation as opposed to a wholesale replacement. That's not to say the technology won't come in the future, but right now there's not really any risk to people losing their roles wholesale. However, that said, it does apply to almost every industry and a lot of functional areas within organizations. Just a list there. It's quite a detailed list. Finance and accounting, billing, invoicing, things like that. Human resources, repetitive processes in terms of employee onboarding, offboarding, salaries, attendance tracking, things like that. Operations, if you think about tracking things, reporting, inventory planning, all that kind of stuff, scheduling, that's great there. IT, backups, password resets, things like that. Software installations can all just be, these are the sort of things that somebody gets a job and they follow a set of rules. It doesn't matter who's doing it, they'll follow the same steps. If we can map the steps, we can create a program that would execute on that, as I said. So just a quick practical example here. The demos the video recordings, we have a lot of video recordings that we can share if anybody's interested, but generally they don't work so well over Zoom. So what I've done is I've given you a laptop here. You will do a process whereby you log in to your system and you need to make a sales report to send to your finance director or whatever it is. Very, very simple task that we would all do. Like I said, this technology does interact with the front end user interface, doesn't have back end programming interfaces. So basically we log in, we collect some information, we copy and paste it, create a report, and then email it off. So number of different screens that we switch, very manual, very repetitive, and we could be potentially doing this, if we're talking invoices, thousands of times a day. So lots of mouse clicks, lots of keystrokes. So I'll just run through it here. We open up our laptop, we need to log into the software using the credentials. The robot can log in using the credentials that we supply. It can navigate to the email client that we're looking for. So it will open up the start menu, navigate to Outlook. You can set the robot up to automatically monitor the inbox so that when a piece of information comes in from a particular sender or with a particular attachment, that will trigger the robot, as opposed to a person having to be there to turn the robot on each day. That's the difference between the sort of assisted and unassisted, as I mentioned earlier. We'll then open up the email client, download the data that we need, download the file, extract some information, or if we get a report from a supplier, we can extract that from there, open up our sales tracker in Excel, navigate to the right cell in there, input this week's, this day's, or this month's sales figures, or whatever numbers that might be, whatever data manipulation we need to do. The robot can be programmed to do any of these calculations, not a problem. Once we've updated the sales tracker with what it is we need to do, we can export that to PDF, switch back to the email client. It can type out an email based on the pre-coded email, attach the file, and then send it off to a distribution list of however many people. So compliance and reporting, very good opportunity here. One of our clients that deals with financial transactions, and there's a lot of lists of thousands and thousands of transactional reports whereby somebody would go in, extract the data, create a little management report, and send that. And they were doing that weekly, and it was taking up a lot of their time, extracting all the data from a number of different web services, collating it all, doing some data manipulation and sending it up. Very simple process here. RPA can obviously handle a lot more complex interactions, loads of different systems if needs be. They can work 24/7. They can wait until something triggers them, or whatever that is. So just a little flavor of what could be done with this sort of stuff. Effectively, as I said, if you can program it and if you can write the rules down, the steps that you would take in order to achieve a process as you would train a new starter, then absolutely you can train a robot. So this is your new digital workforce, effectively. So when we deploy this at a client site, or a client needs to know that or understands that they need, this stuff is coming and they need to get ahead of the curve, and they want to benefit from digital labor, the first thing they really need to think about is their automation strategy. So how do they intend to what's their vision for the future? How do they intend to deploy this in their organization? Now, there's a few, broadly speaking, I've split this on a continuum here, from in-house to outsourced, and this kind of dictates the overall approach that the client would take. Whether they are in-house, you want to be looking for developing and maintaining your own automation initiatives. You want to grow your own capability. You want to train your people to become digital experts, that they can manage and maintain these robots and potentially even program them themselves. That's absolutely fine. A lot of organizations are going that route. What you see generally is larger organizations will do that, and that allows them to obviously control what it is that they program and when, and their whole pipeline, and this is ideal for those with a bit of capex that they can expend in order to become a self-sustaining digital enterprise into the future. The outsource model, what we sort of call robots as a service, this is fairly new in the market, pretty nascent stuff. It's not many people are doing this, and this is more of an OpEx model. This effectively opens up a smaller end of the market. So organizations that potentially don't have the big funds, that don't have the capability to develop a whole team that can manage all this, what they can do is select a few of their support functions or their processes that they can outsource into the cloud. And effectively what they do is subscribe, or on a consumption-based model, will just outsource their business processes, their functional process, whether that be payroll or some employee onboarding or the invoice process. They'll outsource that to robots. So effectively what the trend, I think, back in the 90s, which was offshoring business process outsourcing to cheaper locales where there was cheaper labor, cheaper staff there. This effectively is the same thing, but with robots. So this allows organizations to become more agile, a bit more resilient. They don't have to carry the overhead of a finance team, an IT team, an HR team. They can reduce those teams to their core competencies, focus on what it is that they're good at. And we believe actually this will be a big game changer in the future of work. This is, I think, a lot of organizations, this is how we run our organization. We outsource a lot of our transactional processing to the cloud. and have robots do that for us. This again allows people to focus on what it is that they're good at, what it is they want to be doing, as opposed to the mundane, business processes that we all need to do to keep the business operating. So once we've got our strategy, and again, I'll put it on a continuum, because you may do some, some of your support functions will be outsourced, and some of your core stuff maybe you'll automate on an in-house approach. So it's a flexible model. It's not a binary decision here. So but once we understand what processes we want to go down this route, we need to understand how to deploy the automation interventions, and do we optimize and automate? So we've got our business process. Do we just deploy a robot on there? Well, you can do that, but the risk is you're going to automate a bad process. You're potentially automating a process that's not suitable for it, or automating parts of a process that are not particularly relevant. If you talk to a process engineer, they'll tell you what you need to do is really spend time understanding the process to the nth degree, and every single permutation within that, before you can even think about automation. Well, the risk there is you delay your value realization. So we like to do these together. We don't worry too much about every single permutation on the process. We just get the straight through process, or the happy path, as you call it, the 80% for those that the Pareto rule for those that know that. Get the simplistic model optimized, and then deploy an automation to handle most of the transactional volume. And then what we can do is classify any exceptions to that rule, and then we can on a revision 2 or version 2 of the robot, we can then recode the majority of the exceptions. And a lot of processes you'll never get to 100%. There are always going to be certain exceptions, those hardcore few that either come around so infrequently or so bizarre that you couldn't really automate against. So you're still going to need some people to operate and manage and maintain this. So there's still opportunity there for people to work alongside robots. And as we go into this future of work, this new world, the robotic revolution, what we need to start thinking about is, rather than seeing robots as a threat, rather than seeing them as a threat to our jobs and something to be feared, and we don't want to take the Luddite position and start smashing them up or turning them off. We need to cooperate. What people in the industry are calling cobots. We need to collaborate with them. They can make us better, and we can make them better by harmonizing what we're all good at. So once we know what we want to automate, and we figure out the processes that we need to, whether we just automate immediately tactically, or we optimize strategically, all depends really. If your process is on fire and you need to quickly, you've got compliance issues, get a robot in there quickly, and then think about your optimization. But it still needs to be a considered approach. We would recommend doing a strategic intervention where possible, where you do them both together simultaneously to extract the most value. So should you really? What we're talking about here is, we know we want to automate some processes, and technically speaking, they're feasible, but what we need to do is balance that with the ROI. We need to understand that actually, this is a business case. There needs to be a business case for this, and we need to understand exactly what that is, whether it's hours back to the business, so we free up people to work on more meaningful work or more innovative work, and save them from the mundane. Or if we've got compliance issues and our process is inherently inaccurate, and we've got a regulator breathing down our neck, that could be a business case. Potentially the ROI, the return on the investment there, is a little bit less important, when compliance could be the factor. But what we just need to do is balance the technical feasibility with the commercial viability. If it's not technically feasible, well, we can't do it at all. However, if there's no commercial viability, we need to understand if it's really worth doing. If it's such a rare process that we do on Christmas morning, it's probably not worth it. Somebody can have that as part of their day job. If we're doing it daily and there's high risk and there's high volumes, we need to get it into that you should quadrant there. So just a good little sanity check there that makes sure that we get them both right. So once we've got our current human workforce, once we've augmented them with RPA, there's excess capacity there, accuracy and speed. However, it's not really a harmonized workforce. Effectively what the robots have done is just taken some of the people's work, and then the people are probably kicking about with a bit of spare capacity. Now that's great for those organizations that prioritize, the 20% projects, the innovative projects. I know I've worked for a few that do that, and that's great. I always struggle to do those. It's always Friday afternoon, and I realize I've not done my my 20% project because I'm chasing the hamster wheel. I'm putting out fires. You know, what would be great is to have a human robot there, have a robot assistant there that will help us to do that monotony, keep us on track, and then we can start to think about the strategic, you know, the human, whatever good stuff that the humans bring to the workforce. We can do that. Unfortunately, that potentially means that we will then have to redeploy staff elsewhere in the organization. But the good thing is a lot of the clients that we find, they don't necessarily go the severance route. What they do is there's always work that needs to be done. There's more work, there's more innovative, there's more of these bigger processes. And actually, when an organization wants to go the in-house route, there's a lot of roles that these jobs create in terms of bot managers and business process people, commercial value adds and things like that. So there's a whole center of excellence that I won't go into detail on that now, but there's a whole center of excellence that creates a whole lot more work around this. But just quickly, for those of you who want to deploy this or need this in your organization, or when the time comes for you guys, I'll just give you quickly 6 critical success factors to help you along the way. As I said, strategize your approach, understand your future vision, how this is going to work, and what your vision for your future is, and how you plan to collaborate with these bots. Make sure you've got good governance in place. You want to understand exactly the roles and responsibilities, what constitutes a good automation appraisal. Be very clear in terms of your oversight and objectives of all of this. Clean up your data. Robots do not do well with ambiguous data. It needs to be very, very, very well managed, very tightly controlled. If we've got gaps in our databases, the robots will stop, and then we've got problems. Number 4, change management. This is the hearts and minds. A lot of people get scared about this. Unfortunately, the technologies come in whether they like it or not. This is not just a push really at the bottom of the organization. A lot of time people seem to think it's maybe the less skilled work that's repetitive and monotonous. Actually, I see the biggest change here coming to be in mid-level management. Those mid-level managers that have got fairly big teams, protective over the teams, protective, some take sort of their meaning of their work is to actually, enable their teams, and actually when there's risk to the team or potentially their team is reduced, that becomes a bit of a problem there. So what we need to do is just put our arms around the whole of the organization. It's come from the top down. It is a fundamental culture change within organizations. So it needs to be at all levels. The change needs to be managed. And then harmonize the workforce, teach them about the robots, teach them not to fear the robots. And what you'll find is they'll come to you with a lot of new ideas. People know their processes better than anybody. They're the experts. They will find for you exactly where the robots can be used to the greatest value to augment their work. And a lot of the time people are pleased when these are helping them. And then number 6, don't neglect the maintenance. These robots can be brittle over time. Entropy reigns, and they will start to fail. So you need to maintain them, make sure that they're operating correctly, and we manage any change as it comes. Hopefully forward looking as opposed to reactively. We don't want the robots to go down. So yeah, 6 critical success factors there. If anybody wants this, I can send it, no problem. I'll talk about it in more detail. Just conscious of time here. Software vendors, there's a load of them out there. Just Google UiPath Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism. Or this is from Everest. Gartner and Forrester also do the same. They rank these, and you've probably seen them in your own industries because they rank all sorts of different types of technology and different vendors and whatnot. So again, anybody wants to know a bit more about these, that's absolutely fine. Basically, when one does something, the others catch up. I'm seeing this as a bit more of a commoditized race to the bottom at the minute. So don't worry too much about who you're dealing with. That's not the biggest issue there. As I said, it's the could you, should you, the technical feasibility and the commercial viability when you start to deploy this in your organizations. And the future of work, this stuff's coming. We can't stop the technological steam train that keeps running. As we mentioned at the start, we've had the Industrial Revolution, we had the Luddite rebellion, rejecting those looms. Every time we've thought, this new technology is going to kick us all out of our work, and we're going to be kicking them out, having nothing to do, and the robots are going to take over. This sort of stuff. This will be no different. It's probably going to come faster than the other revolutions. They sort of went over a lifetime or more. we need to be prepared for this one right now. But as with any other emergent technology, there's been concern, but in the end, the reality has been much different, and new roles will emerge. And this will harmonize human and robotic interactions. And this will really, I believe this will improve our quality of life. And so when you're doing this sort of stuff, think long-term, deliver value in the short, and scale it quickly. If you scale it fast, you'll deliver really good value to your organizations. And the best way I can think of to get started, if you know the process, go fast start, assess the process, get to detail and deploy a robot there, build the hype in the organization, and people will understand it. If you have no idea where you're looking, or what sort of processes you need to do for this, get an ideation workshop on the go, have a workshop, facilitate, or understand what the characteristics you're looking for, and get the people to tell you. You'll come up with a good hopper of ideas. If you can appraise them against a number of appraisals, if you go on our website, the Fast Start link, which I can send to you guys, there's a questionnaire there that'll help you get to understanding the sorts of characteristics you need for these processes. And then you can prioritize your hopper and come out with your automation agenda, and you can start building those in, deploying them, and you'll really supercharge value in your organization. You'll be a lot faster, a lot quicker, and a lot cheaper. So I'm conscious I've overran slightly. I do apologize about that. Questions, I think we're going to wait until the end. So if there's anything, I'll be more than happy to discuss. And there's my contact details there. Feel free to give me a shout anytime. I can talk about this stuff all day, and I've barely scratched the surface here. So thank you for your time. I do apologize for overrunning, but I'm more than happy to talk more. Thank you, Rich and Chantel.
Stuart's covered and kind of dovetails really nice. Absolutely love the top trumps analogy of humans versus the kind of RPA robots. So yeah, you should see some kind of parallels and similar sort of concepts and approaches. What I'm going to try and walk through is some typical questions that people come to us when they're talking about artificial intelligence. Most of them kind of revolve around this concept of what's possible with AI. And yeah, we've kind of done introductions already, but I'm Andy Redman. I am cloud solution architect. Means I'm a kind of a blend of a technical and commercially minded person that does as much business strategy these days as I do actually understanding the tech and how to deploy it and things like that. I'm also, according to artificial intelligence, a 33-year-old male with a neutral smile. But more on that later. But yeah, this is just one of the kind of face recognition APIs. If we were at a live event in person, normally we'd have a screen set up with a webcam that you could walk in front of and sort of see how old the API thinks you are and things like that as well. But unfortunately, we can't do that, and it's difficult to kind of replicate over Zoom, obviously. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think I was 31 at the time, so I wasn't too displeased about that, and it's usually really unfriendly on beards. So yeah, that was I screen grabbed it at just the right time, obviously, that it came down to a happy 33. So I work for Wirehive. Wirehive are a tech company with a bit of a difference, I guess. So we're one of the leading Microsoft partners in the UK for things like artificial intelligence and emerging tech. But we're a company with less than 40 people. We operate quite like a digital agency. So we've been founded now for sort of over 10 years, and we've primarily been a go-between for digital industry and tech. And sounds really vague because it is. We do all kinds of different technology. We've been known to dabble in everything from simple web hosting for websites for agencies all the way through to Bitcoins and things like that, setting up your own kind of cryptocurrencies and things like that. So our mission, a nice orange glow I'm getting from my screen, is basically helping businesses be better at what they do. And we like to work with forward-thinking businesses that are trying to improve, whether that's becoming more efficient, like the way that Linda works with her brands and the company she works with. Basically, ideally to make the world a better place, or to improve this experience and things they're passing on to their consumers. I'm going to recap with some pretty basic stuff, so bear with me for the next few slides. But essentially, there is lots of data. So when we talk about why data is such a big topic these days, there's lots of it. Lots of people are comparing it to oil as well. So it's impossible to do a talk about AI without talking about data. It's impossible to talk about data without comparing it to oil or something like that. So literally everyone, I don't know who to attribute this quote to initially, but anyone that's talked about data has kind of come up with this, and you probably heard this before. One interesting take, which is more recently in the last few years, was this quote from investigation done by Gartner, and I really like it. So it's basically talking about data being far more valuable than oil or any fossil fuel, because the data that your business is, or the businesses you're working with, the data that you'll have is intrinsically kind of related to your consumers and the products and services that you do and things like that. So yes, you can go and invest in oil or gold or iron or whatever you think you can invest in, which might be valuable, but data that you already have is far more valuable to you as a business than it is to other competitors and things like that potentially as well. Another nice analogy is this concept of refining it, which kind of goes hand in hand with the oil kind of analogy as well, I guess. But a simple bar of iron is worth so much, and worked into different objects where as you refine that same amount of weight of iron, eventually if you get it into a point where you can refine the iron into balance springs for watches, it becomes massively more valuable to you, obviously, as a maker of fine Swiss watches. But realistically, what this means is turning your data into something that's far more useful to your business, gives you intrinsically more value throughout the business as well. So if you don't make watches, that's fine. If you on any kind of product or service, understanding how you can improve that through analyzing the data in new exciting ways is where you get to that same point. And data really does unlock that. So data gives us new ways of knowing and new things to know. And it really is that kind of that key piece that unlocks the ability to do anything with artificial intelligence. Without good data, which Stuart's already touched on, good data really is needed for the bots to work. Bots will help you get good data as well. So once that's in place, once you're working with Stuart and have your robotic process automation in place, that kind of rules out the majority of those human error and the mistakes that might lead to bad data in the first place. So that puts you in a great place once your data estate is sorted out. It allows you to do much more exciting things. So data feeds AI, and AI loves data, and I love PowerPoint animations and transitions, so get used to those. There'll be a few more. So what do we mean by AI? We've already touched on it before we got started, and obviously throughout the session already. AI is a massive hot topic. So whether it's that example of the bot beating world-class players at Go or chess, whether it's Elon Musk bouncing around doing incredibly crazy things, chips in brains these days as well. We're all going to get microchipped apparently. There's all kinds of things that the press like to jump on with artificial intelligence, and typically it's at the more incredible end of the spectrum where AI we're looking at as a concept where it could become sentient, it could become dangerous to us humans as a race. Bit like this chap. One thing that's really important is to understand that we don't do Terminators. So it's a different kind of spectrum of AI that we work on, and that's not to say it's less exciting. I think for me, the impact it can have on people and their lives can be really, really impressive, and we'll get to some examples of that. Also, though, anything you do with AI, because of that heightened excitement from press and kind of the real kind of, I guess, the extra critic you get from that from doing anything with AI, if it goes badly, means you have to have an increased focus on ethics and responsibility and empathy. So ensuring that you're guarding against bias. If you're using any data that's been gathered from historic practices, we've been pretty bad as a human race going back thousands of years. So you probably want to be very careful around what data you're putting into your machine to train it. Maybe you're using the business's data from the last 10 years. Maybe that's not such a problem, but still there's potential there that you're training based on things that you didn't know were kind of systemic problems throughout the things that you've been doing, and the AI will only continue in the way that you've trained it. It won't necessarily think of ways to do it fairer than you've told it to. So there's things that it can do that make it look like it's thinking for itself, but realistically, it doesn't have the emotional intelligence that humans do, and that's really key to understand. So you have to design that in. You have to, before you set something out there to start making, or at least helping you make decisions, you need to understand its limitations and the potential threats. If you put something out there, it can be That could be something very kind of elaborate, like an algorithm that decides the sentencing for a court case to help a judge make a decision on someone's likelihood to reoffend based on the sentence. And that's been done, and that's frightening. And it's, yeah, it went wrong. It was bad. But that's because it's been trained on bad data, all the way through to hand dryers, automatic hand dryers in washrooms that didn't work with darker skin because they just didn't think the design through. So it's great to have that automation there. When it senses a hand, it worked, but it wasn't tested, and the kind of the ethics and the design that went into it wasn't good enough. So anytime you're putting any kind of automation into something, you have to be very careful around the outcomes, because yeah, the when it goes wrong, guess what? There'll be press sniffing around it much more than otherwise. If you were just building some sort of simple product that's maybe human led, I think people are more receptive of human mistakes than AI mistakes. Also, don't make Terminators, because that's just asking for trouble. As well as a hot topic, it's a massive opportunity. So I won't let you even read all of the quotes on the screen there, but there's some big people talking about big numbers in the near future. What's really important, and why this slide's in here, is to tell you it's not about 2035 or what's coming in the future. The opportunity is now, and to be honest, this slide has been doing this for 5 years. So the opportunity was 5 years ago. If you're not already doing anything with AI, you probably find that your competitors are, and it's a huge opportunity to try and catch up with that. Maybe you're lucky, maybe the industry that you're in, they're not quite using it yet, or you've still got a cutting edge if you pick it up now. But it's really important to understand this isn't science fiction. There's lots you can do really easily today. And if we had more time, I'd be doing live demos to demonstrate just how easy it is to pick some of these things up, because it's quite revealing. Another quote that I really like is this one, all the way from the very top, from Microsoft. It's why we talk about Microsoft tech more than we talk about anything from Amazon or Google. They've much the same as Stuart mentioned with the leading providers of RPA tools and automation tools. It doesn't really matter from a tech perspective whether you work with Microsoft or Amazon or anyone else. The tech is there or thereabouts. Someone brings out something new 2 weeks later, they've kind of caught up. But Microsoft have got this real focus on empathy and fairness, and a great kind of outlook. They've done primetime TV ads out there that some of you may have seen, focusing on what the future might look like and what you're going to do with it, basically. So this quote is all about businesses out there should be looking at converting what data they have into AI to kind of give them that competitive advantage, which in a recession that we're inevitably going to be working through with the pandemic, now's just an important time as ever to really understand that competitive advantage that you might have by leveraging that data that's maybe sitting there underutilized in a centralized system somewhere. I'm conscious that I haven't really explained what AI is yet, but we'll get to it. So starting at the most basic level, A means artificial, so not biologically born. We have man-made something. And intelligence, the ability to apply knowledge and skills to something. So in this case, we're talking generally around applying data, extracting insights from data is where that knowledge comes from. So at least when we're born, most of us start off with some level of intelligence, and we train in a specific domain to be augmented in our abilities to do our jobs better. So we go to school, we go to university, we do training, we do job specific training. So a salesperson learns how to close and how to do their sales business really well, and they're better at it than they were before they did their training. That's pretty obvious, right? So automation can help through software. So even at the most basic level, just having a CRM that's got all of your company contacts in there that tells you the last time you phoned that person, and it's got their phone number and everything to hand. You don't have to remember it yourself. Software is helping us do that job better. So rather than just using a file of facts or something, we've got a much more intuitive system that makes us more able in our abilities to do that job well. And then artificial intelligence or machine learning as part of that takes the next step. So in the same analogy, a salesperson using an AI-driven CRM system, it might be recommending who they should call next in their day based on a number of factors. So it could be patterns that that customer's taken. Maybe they've been on the website a few more times than other people, or anything out there that maybe that person, if that salesperson, if they could pause time and look at every single data that they could, and then make a decision, what's the best outcome that they could possibly do? What's the best decision they could? That's not feasible to pause time, obviously, but the machine learning algorithm can be doing that in the background and making recommendations for them on the fly. So when they next come to do something that only a human can do, they can be taking a recommendation that's driven by that artificial intelligence rather than just maybe guessing or using their intuition themselves. Next step beyond that augmented ability is apparent intelligence. This is, to Rich's point at the start of the session, this ability to pass the Turing test. So can you build some software that looks like it or feels like you're talking to a human? It's been done. It is possible, obviously. It's not necessarily the best way of delivering service to people. I think there's a kind of uncanniness of when you're talking to something that's pretending to be a human, but actually it's not. It's that kind of terrible call center kind of experience that we all hate. When we realize we're being tricked, it's not a great place to be. So, and the worse than that is the super intelligence, where it's deciding it for itself that the best thing to do for the business is to exterminate all the humans and take control itself. So we like to draw a line before that one, and we like to really focus on this augmenting abilities. It's about, much to the point of the angle of the robotic process automation from Stuart's talk, it's about understanding that we can make the businesses far more efficient at what they do by upskilling people, by putting technology into place. It's the same way that people use word processor and Excel rather than using paper these days. Using some AI or using some robots to help businesses do what they do is no different from that. It's no scarier than installing Word and Excel on a PC. So just to recap, software gives us data. We as humans are really intuitive and want to understand as much as possible of that data. So we do analytics. Big data and all this extra data that we have from smartphones being in our pockets and all sorts of things really push the computational power for us to do machine learning and have these kind of software-based decisions. All of this, really importantly, needs to lead to an action. Otherwise, it's going to be no help to us. So it's really important to focus on the value and the outcomes of what we're going to get from that. So at the top, we have human intelligence, and at the bottom, we have artificial intelligence. Machine learning, I'm going to sort of whiz through this and not go into too much detail here, but essentially there's elements of machine learning and basically ways of deciding, well, how much do I need, how many do I need, and is this normal, is this abnormal, that type of thing. It can look at data and kind of classify things and help you understand what it actually means. Deep learning is a subset of that. Essentially, you do a bit more machine learning is to really simplify it, and what that gives you is the ability to sort of take the artificial intelligence to the next level and sort of replicate what's possible in terms of the human senses, I guess. So if we look at kind of some examples, I won't read through all of them, but if you currently have anyone making a decision, big or small, about what they do and how they go about their day, artificial intelligence can help them make that decision more effectively. I really do believe that. Whether it's appropriate or not depends on commercial viability, the same graph that Stuart shared, right? Is it really worth investing in? Depends what that means to the business and things like that, not necessarily. And it's not about putting AI everywhere for the sake of it, but in the right use case and to really affect the improvement of the business in key areas, absolutely, and it really can help. How do Microsoft really help with this? So at the very start, there's these cognitive services. These are loosely based around the human senses. And what these are pre-built algorithms from Microsoft that you can plug into existing software and things like that to completely transform and basically improve your software and the services that you deliver without being a data scientist, without having to do any machine learning and things yourself. You don't need to even really know much code to be able to integrate these into the software. So the perfect example, and I think we'll share the links at the end of the session to go and watch these videos because they don't play well over Zoom and they'd eat up all my talk if I got to show you all the videos. This is the Seeing AI app. Ironically, from Microsoft, it's an iPhone app, but if you have an iPhone, please do check it out. It's fantastic. So it's a Seeing AI app. It's built to help people that are visually impaired. It's actually written by this chap on screen, Saqib Sheikh, who is he was blind from about 7 years old, if I remember correctly. He can write software through audible feedback of what he's typing on a keyboard through his headphones, and he used that kind of accessibility to then write an app using cognitive services, which can take a picture on his phone or take a picture with the smart glasses that he's wearing, and the API explains what's in front of him. So, for example, this picture, it will tell you that it's a girl in the park throwing a frisbee. So the key challenges from a kind of an architectural perspective from where I sit is kind of how can technology help the visually impaired? And obviously we need the results spoken back, because just it sort of coming up with it on screen in text isn't very useful. So we need kind of two things we can solve there. And very simply, two APIs solve that. So we have computer vision and we have the speech services. You'll all be familiar with kind of speech to text and text to speech. So that's a done thing. We're all used to that, but computer vision is really cool. So this takes an image we provide to that API, simple as just uploading that as part of the app or sending that to the API. However we want to do that as part of automation potentially as well. And it will describe what's in the image. It will give us a caption of this is a man riding a skateboard. It will tell us kind of a RACI score for adult moderation purposes. Great for marketeers, because if you ever ask the public to upload images as part of a campaign, the public aren't great. They're not great people. And yeah, this can go through and sift through 70-80% of those, and anything that gives it high score for that, you can bin straight away. Anything that's kind of in a gray area, you get the humans to check, and it's great to have that kind of intuition and confidence score built in. And all of those confidence scores are kind of shown like this. So you get categories and all the scores and the confidence. You get all of that back from each API query. So really cool stuff. On to the time, so I'm going to skip through those. There's plenty more APIs if anyone wants to pose a question of what's possible and things like that. That's just the cognitive services. And again, they cover all of the human senses you can think of, and they are just the tip of the corner of what you can do with data and AI technology on Azure. So fascinating stuff. I do talk literally for an entire day doing this full deck. So yeah, there's lots to cover, and even then, that's just the data and AI stuff. Another thing that's really exciting. This video is just under 9 minutes long. So again, we'll pop it in the chat for you, but it's probably, for me, it's the most impressive case study video I've ever seen, and my job is to look at these things and tell people about them. So Microsoft Premonition, if you Google it, you'll see something very different from about 4 or 5 years ago, where there is basically a chap catching mosquitoes with a net and then taking sort of samples and then sending them to a lab, and they did a proof of concept that they can do genomic sequencing with machine learning algorithms, and basically they can kind of understand if epidemics and things like that are about to happen. But in the last couple of years, ironically, hopefully it was a bit sooner, we wouldn't have had such a problem with COVID. But what they're now doing is they've built these devices that can basically sample automatically up to 10,000 mosquitoes per day, and it will see a mosquito fly by. It will decide whether it wants to capture it or not for sampling, and then it will automatically upload that to the cloud. It's sampled with 3 billion different genomic sequences, to the point where it can understand if the blood from that mosquito was originally from a cow of a specific breed. If so, the family tree of that cow, if that cow had any diseases and things like that, either genetic or currently at that time based on the content of the blood. Fascinating stuff. And I guess the application for that is you can have these devices based around different habitats around the world, and you can monitor things like Zika outbreaks and various different kind of diseases that are around the world. If this is in sort of the wet markets in China, for example, a few years ago, this we get the DNA from the bat or whatever it was that caused this in the first place, right? And we can track that, and we can deal with it before it does this to the economy and does this to many sort of people and families and things like that. So absolutely massive kind of applications for how it can change the lives of people that are visually impaired and change all of our lives through making the world a safer place. And the beauty of this in particular is this is from an equality and kind of fairness standpoint. This isn't just people that are paying for it. This is technology that's making the world a better place for everyone, regardless of whether you've paid some money to Microsoft or not. So that's really nice. My last point I just want to touch on is how you can kind of identify an AI opportunity. So lots of amazing blue sky things and crazy ideas we've had over the years. Only one of them didn't work. So if you really want to know, you can ask me in the Q&A which one that was. But yeah, basically anything that's a decision that a human can make, an AI can definitely be overlaid on top of that and generally make that more effectively and more consistently. Much to the point, similar to what Stuart said around, there's no dips in productivity at lunch. Humans make decisions poorly when they haven't enough caffeine and things like that. But I guess the general approach and advice that we would give to anyone that's maybe got an idea, you need to think about your strategy as a business, understanding that and making sure that's really clear and where you want to be in 3 years and what generally the kind of the problems are at the moment on stopping you getting there. You need to have data. Everyone's got data, but when we say you need to have data, we're talking about, is it available for us to get our hands on it if you're working with us? Is it actually sort of consistent? Is it error prone? Does it need cleaning up and things like that first? It's normally the first hurdle that we work on. And then obviously you just need to do some insights, right? Well, what that really means is you need to think about data practices and artificial intelligence practices and develop those as new processes for the business and understand how you adopt these technologies. Again, it's a cultural shift. It's a new way of thinking, but it doesn't have to be any harder than deciding that we're going to use Office for our business kind of technology or anything like that. So yeah, it helps as well to come to great events to kind of talk around these things and have those stupid ideas and pop them in the Q&A and things like that to really understand if they are things that are feasible. But ultimately it comes down to that action point, and is it valuable? Is it feasible commercially for the business? Because yeah, if it's not, then you can waste a lot of money on these tools and then not get the best out of them. So it's understanding the design up front. Oh.
There we go. That was really good. I think people are just trying to figure out how to unmute themselves after that. That was amazing.
By the button. That's excellent, Andy, and Stuart as well. We must have questions. Surely someone's got questions. I've got a question, but who wants to go first in terms of questions? So shout it out.
I'm blown away. Actually, that's really spooky, Andy. My first degree is science and biology, and I did genetics and animal growth and development. So I'm going to be watching that little 9-minute YouTube video. Stuart, just on, can I go back to your presentation? Well, and Andy might have some comments on this as well. When you are developing those parts of a process or an operational process that you feel can be done by an artificial intelligence, how much do you then have to continue interacting with the organization, because processes are continually evolving? Does the artificial intelligence to a point actually define how it could be improved itself, or is that going into what Andy described as like the super intelligence?
Yeah, I think initially these robots don't self-heal, self-manage and self-maintain, at least at this point. I mean, there are very expensive routes into that with big data and machine learning that can start to do that. I think for the most part, for commercially viable processes within an organization, it's a case of really understanding the process, standardizing the process as best you can, outsourcing what is stable to the machine, and anything that the machine then can't process, you'll have a skeleton team of people available to handle those exceptions, classify your exceptions if you've got a particularly large number of them, rework the code to incorporate those to get to a revision 2, and you know, improve the productivity of the robot, reduce down the number of exceptions. Yeah. However, when business processes change, there is going to need to be recoding in terms of the algorithms.
When a business process changes, or when let's say a new product is introduced into the business, is that something that is fairly simple to incorporate into the existing process definition? Is it sort of to the point that, is it a skeletal framework that is then applied to a volume of different products or services or channels that the artificial intelligence would automatically pick up? Or is it a case of you have to keep adding on new channels or products into the process that the artificial intelligence is dealing with. Am I explaining that very well?
Yeah.
I mean, if the process is the same, maybe Andy wants to take this one. Do you have something?
I can do. Yeah, so I think from Stuart's side of things, it's great to invest in kind of the automation that he does, because if you've got a process that remains the same, if the same people have to copy and paste things from the same sort of form or do the same kind of data entry work or mundane tasks, as long as they don't change, the bots that Stuart can work on will remain the same. That doesn't change. But if you're doing anything more complex with artificial intelligence, it depends on the type of decisions that's really making. So going back
so
to
essentially then it's picking up data in a field of a report or a spreadsheet. So if if you've got data about Nike shoes versus data about Nike runners, that doesn't matter. It's looking for data that's sitting in a field somewhere and using that to then drive it into its own process flow.
Yeah, if you make a change like that, you might need to retweak the bot or build a new bot that does that. With more complex AI, like if you ran cruise ships for a company and you wanted to know how much water you needed on board for drinking water, for example, that's quite a complex thing, and that can change based on people's diets changing and throughout the year and seasonal trends and things like that. So that you would need to constantly evaluate, and it does need constant data scientists to work on that, or you need to. There's an element of self-healing you can build out eventually when things get more mature, but it's a case of sort of doing a control set and monitoring that and having a kind of a feedback loop to do that. But that's very complex, and that's not something that you can just
so that is a learning process, is it?
And it's all software really, whether it's the bots that Stuart does, not to dumb it down too much, but it's clever software. Whether it's very complex AI that tells you how much water you need on your cruise ships, or it's just the image recognition for the Seeing AI app. It's software that doesn't get better over time. It will continue to be as bad as you wrote it the first place in the AI kind of context. So it doesn't think, oh, I'm more intelligent than this, I can do a better job. If you build something that's pretty bad on the ethical side, it will offend people consistently, more consistently than a human would. So it's great for automation purposes, but you need to design it well, and you need to, like any process really, evaluate that over time and make sure it's as good as it can be.
Yeah. And you ain't going to stick me in front of one of those cameras. I do not wish to be aged and sexed. Thank you. Thanks, guys. That was really, I know I'm probably the only audience that's not an invested party, but that was really good stuff this evening.
Yeah, it was really good. Anybody else got any more questions?
I really want to know what the piece of AI that didn't work was from Andy's presentation.
Controversial, I guess. I'm not going to say what company it was, but there's a company that's got a kind of a vested interest in helping kind of expecting parents and sort of mums to be. And a chap came who, to be fair, was in the developer team. It wasn't like a senior person from that company, and said, could we use artificial intelligence to identify the reason of a baby crying? And the reason I kind of hint at this and get people to ask this question is because it's a great kind of example of, it might be possible, but do you really want to be doing that? Like, do you really want to be the company that gave the wrong advice on something as serious as that? So obviously from a technical standpoint, it might be scientifically possible, but babies, I think, I kind of ruled it out and said no, because I think every baby's going to be different, and it's probably not possible for a human to just based on a recording. Like if you sent a recording to a GP or something, I'd be very surprised if they say that's because the baby's hungry just from the sound. But if that was possible, if there was someone that was trained that well to identify any baby crying, yes, you could use their experience, build that into an algorithm, and the app could tell you exactly what was wrong with the baby. But in the 1 in a million times that went wrong and the baby got neglected for the wrong reasons, it's a horrendous place to be, and you're not getting much value out of that unless you monetize that and build an app that people are going to pay for to identify what's wrong with their baby. It's a dangerous game. So should have, could have, would have kind of thing. Like what's the value in doing it, and is it actually feasibly possible? I'm not sure, but that's the one example, Chantal.
I guess that's also ethics as well, and whether it's actually worth it from an ethical standpoint.
Yeah.
On that side of things, human nature changes over time. I mean, when we first started talking about, when we cloned Dolly the sheep, that was, in a lot of sectors was considered to be the most unbiblical, unreligious possible thing that scientists could have come up with. And now we are talking about designer babies, which in the scientific arena is probably happening or getting closer to reality than the public are aware of. And it's just, our morals and values are changing to the point where that might well be perfectly acceptable in another 150 years' time, that one baby in a million is worth the artificial intelligence.
There's an interesting book actually that alludes to that, Linda. It's Noah Harari, I believe, was the author. I think it was not Sapiens. I think that was his first one. Homo Deus, I think it was the sequel to that.
My God.
And that's like a brief history of the future of humankind. And that goes on to talk about the designer babies and how are they going to be treated in the new world, as it were. His take on it is that actually how humans treat dogs today is how these superhumans are going to treat us standard humans in the future.
Yeah, we need
Brave New World.
Yeah, we need to start the digital book club, don't we? That's so it's Homo Deus.
Homo Deus, yeah, I believe is the one. I can send you the link.
Yeah, do that. I've got the movie on my to-do list. That's the you.
Hi guys. I actually have a question for Stuart.
Hi, Victor.
Hi, how's it going? Just regarding the bots, obviously, like we've been talking a lot, me and you, regarding certain things, and I did some other research, and I always come across the fact that a bot, or like one bot is deployed to do this, or 2 or 3 bots can be deployed to do that. So is it that in like a small accountancy, or like in a small accounting department, would one bot just take over the work of one person, or could it take over like a group of people doing the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. One bot is generally more efficient than a human. It's generally a higher ratio than that. It's not normally 1-to-1. However, there are, at least maybe if it's new for an organization, or they want to go the virtual assistant route, whereby they have just some robots deployed on a laptop, whereby it helps you do your work. And if you speak to the software vendors, their vision, their grand plan is a robot for every person. Obviously, they want to sell the licenses. In my opinion, in my experience, one bot is far more efficient than a single person. One bot can do the work of 10 or 20 people, potentially more. What you've generally got is the bot will work 24/7, which is 3 shifts with no loss of productivity. So you're then looking at almost 4 shifts. So just even in one day, you've got a 4-to-1 ratio. But actually, when you start to take into account the accuracy and the speed, you don't have to then do any rework and just the constant speed. Generally, what we've seen is up to 5 to 10 people. There was one whereby it took up nearly 20 people in terms of the work that it could do. So yeah, bots are inherently more efficient, and a 1-to-1 ratio is an inefficient way of doing it. And if you're paying license fees, you're gonna rack up some cost pretty quickly there.
I think it can help with unattended bots as well, Stuart, isn't it? So for an energy company that has meter readings coming in that they need to rebill to commercial clients, a bit of automation in the middle of there that doesn't have to run necessarily on the PCs, but it can run on the inbox that receives the invoices. Yeah. Then it can distribute those to the right clients based on looking up the billing contact of each of those clients that the meter is associated to. There is a company we worked with that had a team of 4 people full time just doing that practice, and now those people know a lot more about technology. They understand how the technology can help them do those kind of jobs better. So that's them sorted for life in terms of being sort of trained up on the best ways of doing that in any business they work in, and they're doing more interesting things with their time in that business, much more valuable to the company as well.
Absolutely.
And in that situation, it's just one bot that's doing the work of these 4 people.
Yeah, if it's, I think to your point, if it's a department that all do the exact same thing, so there's part of the sales team or the accounting team or something, they they have to do the exact same thing when that one email comes in or when that invoice or order comes through, then yeah, absolutely, you can centralize that and not have it running. Nobody sort of has to have one bot each, so to speak. It can be running sort of centrally for that department through the tools that Stuart's talking about.
And that point on centralization there, Andy, I think that's going to do well for a lot of UK councils. UK councils have a lot of the same staff, in their own regions. If they can harmonize their operations, then you can have a centralized bot farm, as they call it, that can just work over much vaster distances. Much more. It can span the regions and whatnot, and there's no any spare capacity in each of those people is automatically taken up by the robot, and the efficiencies are just vast. It really will change the world.
We all pay less council tax and our bins get collected quicker. That's great.
Except there's going to be a massive proportion of people on job benefits and this is where we're creating a bigger divide between skilled and unskilled labour. And by introducing obviously robotic or computerized and automated lesser skilled work, as you call it, the lower value jobs, which I totally understand, but there is a percentage of the human population who only want to sit at a desk and do that repetitive, mundane stuff because they feel safe and comfortable and it's within their skills and capabilities. And so that's the big moral dilemma, is what is going to happen to that proportion of society who actually like doing that work?
And I have another question for you, Andy. Talking about the threats of AI, or like the fear from the society. And you more or less said, as we know, like with Stuart's bots, that they more or less do what they're told or what they're programmed to do, within parameters. But like, what about, I heard, I think it was like last year, I forget if it was a Microsoft or Google, I think their AI system that was programmed to talk to each other or something, and that they came up with like a new language that no one could understand, and like Microsoft would like also like pull the plug, So where does that leave us in case they do get too smart?
Yeah, that's very different to anything that I showed. So that there's AI that's basically no more exciting than Stuart's bots. Really, it's just software that's helping you make decisions. It's the same way that we have autocorrect for spelling mistakes or predictive text that thinks this is the word you're typing. I think it's no more intelligent than that. It's not going to start texting people on your behalf without you knowing, But there is programs and investigations and trials and studies into things that can interpret data and then make its own decision, and it learns over time, and things that is then trying to learn and adapt and constantly evolve, then that's where it can start to write its own languages. And it wasn't not necessarily that bot in its iteration would have gone so far out of control, would have been dangerous to us. I think they just pulled the plug because basically it was going wrong, and that's bad press, right? I think that's more of the real scenario there. But yeah, the more you're building things, there's always parameters that it's working within, like you're saying. But if you're building something that's doing something very drastic, or if you replace a judge with a system that just without any human intuition or any human in the loop is sentencing people in a courtroom, that's a horrible place to be, because it's gonna go wrong. So it's always about anything you're doing with complex AI. It's about keeping the human in the loop. So in the same way that you're building out robots, and if you look at the way that Tesla manufacture cars, they have hardly anyone working on the plant floor, but they have everyone retrained and upskilled to kind of operate that machinery and make sure that it's preventive maintenance happening, things like that. So keeping humans in the loop has never been more important with the more complex stuff.
Thank you.
Cool. That's really good, guys. Thank you so much for your time, everyone, for joining today, and thank you to Stuart and Andy for such fascinating presentations. It's I'm going to go and watch the film AI again and watch it for a while. It's a good film to watch, so
yeah, me too.
I recommend it. Cool. So I'm just going to jump back into my presentation. So what have we got coming up? Right. Just going to share my screen. you guys see my screen okay?
Okay.
So coming up, we have got 19th of May is the next KDM, which is Clockwork Moggy. The guys who is, that's kind of like the Medway KDM. That's coming up in a couple of weeks' time. And then on the 2nd of June, we've got the Ashford KDM, which is run by our friends at 6.2. And then we are back on the 23rd of June. We're running the next one. As always, we've got our survey there. Please take the time to fill it in. If you know anyone that's looking to speak as well, we're always looking for new speakers, so let them know to get in contact with us. We're always kind of booked up quite far advance, so it'll be a little while yet, but by all means, we're always interested to speak to new speakers. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this evening. And thank you all for coming. Thank you so much.